So now I want to discuss an agent that plays the role of the good neighbor. So Rachel and I moved into a condo complex in Waterbury, Connecticut. And 2 doors down, there was a guy named Terry. And Terry was an African-American male. He was kind of fat. And he was a real happy, friendly sort of guy. In that whenever you walked out of your house, he seemed to want to wave and talk to you. Whenever we were coming or going, it seemed like he was out in the parking lot too. And he would try to catch your eye by kind of walking slowly and looking over at you, and went out of his way to say hello. And he acted something like of a lonely guy that wanted to talk to you. So Terry had a woman living with him, and they had a young infant child. I think it was a daughter. And as soon as she has this child, she breaks up with Terry and leaves, and you never see her again. Only Terry is there. And I believe that Terry mentions that his wife broke up with him for another guy. So of course we felt kind of sorry for Terry. So Terry was a Jehovah's Witness. And a couple of times when he saw us coming or going, he would walk over to say hello, and he would tell us some things about being a Jehovah's Witness. And so I had discussed a little bit with him about the New World Order and the Illuminati. And I asked him if he knew of the Alex Jones show. And he said he did. And he said that the Jehovah's Witnesses are like the truth movement in religion, and that they have the best information. He goes, do you ever get a Jehovah's Witness trying to hand you a pamphlet at your door? And I told him yes. And he said, you really should try to read those sometimes because it has good information. He says, I know all religions are controlled, but the Jehovah's Witnesses seem to be the most honest. So I would talk to him sometimes when I would see him outside the condo. So one day I drive up, I park the car, and I see Terry standing out there with a few other guys. And I walk over there to say hello, and Terry introduces me to his cousin. And another neighbor of ours is standing out there too, who I knew. So we're standing there talking for a minute, and then a guy pulls up wearing sunglasses, and he's driving real slow, and he stops right in front of where we're talking, and he starts taking photographs of our condo units. And Terry gestures as if he is agitated and confused, and he's like, what the hell is this? And so I walk forward and I say, excuse me, why are you taking photographs of our condo units? And the guy looks up at me with the sunglasses, he kind of rolls up the window, and he backs up and he drives off. So it seemed like the guy who was taking photographs was going out of his way to stand out as being someone who was an agent or was acting strange. So I guess around 2010, Terry begins to knock on the door, and he loves movies. And at this time, Rachel and I would buy VHS tapes at the pawn shop for $1 each. So we had 2,000 videotapes on a shelf in the living room. And so he would knock on the door and ask if he could borrow a few videos. And he would do this maybe every week. So I said, sure, Terry, come on up and take a look. So one day he came over, and I noticed that he began to look wild-eyed. He looked almost hysterical, and he was standing there with some videotapes, and he said, John, he goes, do you hear what they're doing next door? Because there was a condo unit in between his condo and my condo. I was in unit 7, and he was in unit 9. There was a young guy and his girlfriend, and they must have been kind of like in their earlier to mid-20s. So we were a little bit older than them, and they lived in the unit between his condo and my condo. And he says, do you hear that noise? They're like making a lot of noise. And I said, when they first moved in here, they must have thrown some parties, because all I heard was them running up and down the stairs, and it was getting a little irritating because it was happening late at night. I said they did that for the first month they lived here, but I didn't make a big deal about it, and I guess they got that out of their system because it's been kind of quiet. And he says, you don't hear that music that they're blasting over there? And I say, no, I never hear any music. And as he is looking at me, his eyes are kind of bulging out, and he has this kind of hysterical expression on his face. and he's acting paranoid. So at that time, I think if the music was bad, I would have heard it too. So I don't know what's happening with him. So at the time, I guessed that it would be best just to remain calm about it and not ask him a lot of questions because he looked kind of hysterical already. And I didn't really know what to say. But I was hearing no music. So I don't know why he was saying this. And I said something, well, are you sure it's not coming from the other side? And he said, no, that's Norm's house. And I've known Norm for years. He never blasts music late at night. So I did not really know what to say. So at that point, he took a few videotapes and then he left. And he came over a couple more times that month. And every time he came over, he said basically the same thing. Are you sure you're not hearing that music that they're blasting next door? And I said, no, I'm not hearing anything at all. And he was saying, well, it's getting hard to sleep at night with that music that they're playing. So again, I don't really know what to say. So he's holding the videotapes that he took last time, and he's like, well, I brought these back for you. And I'm like, well, take some more if you want. And so he left. Then about a week later, he knocks on the door again, and he tells me that he's moving out. I think he said something like the landlord raised the rent on him again, and he has to move to his cousin's house. So he'll be moving out soon, so he wanted to say goodbye. And so I gave him my phone number, and I gave him my YouTube address, and I told him to keep in contact. So after that, I did not see Terry or his car there. So around April of 2010, a few months later, the people next door in apartment 8 seemed to be playing this strange music, and it sounded like real low bass waves that vibrated the house. If you ever stand by a bass woofer, you could feel that bass kind of vibrating. Well, imagine one endless bass note vibrating, and what accompanied this noise were terrible feelings of anxiety, nausea, agitation. While this music was being played, I felt extremely nervous and agitated. It was hard to complete tasks. Like if I was typing something, it was hard to type. If I was trying to do a series of tasks to organize or clean the house, I would do things out of order. And oftentimes, this bass noise, this vibrational noise would start whenever I was doing some sort of task. If I had to fill out some paperwork, if I had to write an estimate, a business estimate, if I was writing a paper, if I was creating a video, this would start. I noticed at times that my children were also affected. I picked up my children one day. Rachel was working late. She was at a job site. So I picked up my kids at the daycare. I drove them back and I put a kids show on for them. And I went into my office area and began to do some work. And again, the vibrational noise started and I started getting agitated. And I noticed that my children were no longer sitting there quietly watching the TV show. What they were doing was they were running toward each other from opposite ends of the couch, and they were jumping and colliding against each other. Now my kids never behaved this way. They were acting crazy. My kids would roughhouse a little bit, but I never saw them acting like this. They were running from opposite ends of the couch. They were jumping up in the air and colliding against each other, so you could hear their bodies like crack. And then they would fall down and start laughing hysterically and then run back and do that again and again and again, like they were crazy. And I went in there and I said, no, we're not going to do that. You got to calm down. And I looked at them and they were both had this kind of crazy look on their face. So oftentimes at this point in my life, I would stay up later than Rachel. So Rachel would be in bed around 9 or 10. Because she would get up earlier than I was, and I would be up until, midnight, 1 or 2. And oftentimes, this weird vibrational stuff would happen in the middle of night when they were sleeping. So I was walking up the hill one day to try to get rid of some of this anxiety that had seemed to build up in me since they started using these sound weapons. And I see Terry driving down. And I waved at him, and he stopped his car, and he looked a lot better. He no longer looked paranoid. And I said, Terry, I'm so glad to see you right now. I wanted to tell you that you were right about that music. A few months after you left, they started playing that same weird music. And it is agitating. And I think it's something like an elf weapon that you could read about on the internet. An extremely low frequency sound wave weapon. Because that's no ordinary music. That's some sort of harassment. And instead of looking solemn about it, instead of looking concerned, a weird grin crossed Terry's face. And he's like, oh, word? What? And he was looking at me like he was amused or excited about it. And he started to play kind of dumb. He's like, what music? I was like, remember how you came over my house before you left and you were complaining that the neighbors were playing some sort of weird music that was causing you to stay awake at night and it was disturbing you? And he's like, yeah, well, sorta, you know, I said that? I don't really remember. And he was smiling and he was acting like a flake. And just then an Indian lady drove up, like from India. And she has an accent and she says, where is the renter's office for this complex? And Terry says, there is no renter's office in the complex, but I know who runs the place. I know who's the manager over here. I'll take you to them. And he seemed more than happy to drive off with an absolute stranger than to have a serious conversation with his old friend and neighbor. So this is how agents will act. Terry used to go out of his way to want to walk over and discuss things with me like the Illuminati, the Alex Jones show, conspiracy theories, and the Jehovah's Witness religion that he was part of. Then he came over complaining about noise harassment. Then he moved out. And then when the noise harassment started on me and I saw him out and I brought this up to him, he became amused, flaky, indirect, and he acted kind of stupid. He acted like he enjoyed hearing that it was happening to me and did not want to confirm what he claimed happened to him. So he was playing stupid.